You are watching Man World. The story started in the central district of Lyoning province. Lyoning is a coastal province in northeast China. The farming started flourishing from here, but as it was located far in the frontier, the culturally backward people had a strange sense of inferiority among themselves. However, due to their rough temperament, in every conflict they got involved, none of the factions underestimated the Lyoning province. The ground of Musum in Lyoning province was the place where Goryeo and the central district engaged in fierce battles. Then the bronze black dragon statue appears. In the Hyolupyeom, the magnificence of the bronze black dragon creeps in atmosphere, in honor of the fierce battles. In Lyoning province, Musum, a stage in an open field surrounded by people are visible. And up in the mountain is Hyolupyeom, where the bronze black dragon statues appears. And here in Hyolupyeom, Ryokbu and Yangxianjiang fight will be witnessed. In order to gain supremacy in the north, these two factions, through their own representatives, duked out with their strength in front of the two faction warriors. Standing in front of each other, Ryokbu's leader started the conversation by saying that it has been a while, with a grin on his face, and seems a little bit excited. Yangxianjiang leader then replied as he examined him and told him that he is looking good, also called him Master Man. Yangxianjiang's leader said that Mo Yangxi opened the Gabong Gate more than 10 years ago and that the leader's position in Lyoning has been vacant for too long now. Then he assures his opponent that today he will be his stepping stone as he take the supremacy of Lyoning province. Then was introduced as the 10,000 sword, Chial Ho Sim. The leader of Ryokbu was also introduced as the dance of the strong wind, Man Jiak Sang, and replied his opponent taunt with a confident attitude, questioning the nonsense prolonged conversation, emphasizing that they should start immediately. He continues and remind his opponent that in the past the central district and Goryeo fought their blood-curdling battle as in immeasurable bloods and tears were shed. Then he mockingly remarked that he would now cover the same Hyolupyeong's ground with the blood of the entire Yangxianjiang. Hearing that makes his comrade excited and cheered for him while shouting their faction name. Then a new character shows up, an old beggar drinking. Seems like he heard what is happening, and caught up because he knew that the leaders of Ryokbu and Yangxianjiang are the best in the region. He told himself that he is living a luxurious life now. The old beggar holding his drink, hair all messy and his ripped clothes. He looks at what is about to happen between Ryokbu and Yeonseongyeon, living up to their reputation. Seems like he ran 1,000 miles in order to be there after hearing that the two known persons are getting down to business. Next thing happens, the swords clash. It is between a Master Man's matchless force versus Master Chial's dragon sword. Looking at the event, the old beggar is curious as to who will come out on top. The old beggar is actually the public elder, the Iron Man Hong Mu-jayu. A mysterious man appeared out of nowhere. Hong Mu-jayu was hooked on how the fight is still going and took pride in himself as a strong observant man, and was surprised as how he never noticed the mysterious man appear until he's near. Hong Mu-jayu has a confused face as he feels uneasy. He asks himself if he is going senile. He could not believe it. Yangxianjiang and Ryokbu clash their swords and carry on fighting. It's as if the mysterious man's curiosity was answered. The forces he felt were because of the battle in the central district between the two. His crystal-like blue eyes shows that he could have enjoyed it if it was under normal circumstances, but the mysterious man suddenly felt the tingle in his chest, making him touch the dragon statue to support himself. He gritted his teeth and wished that he had a little bit more time. His hands in the dragon statue began glowing blue. He thought about his little daughter. Hong Mu-jayu felt the intense serenity from the mysterious man. If he was a human, it would be given that he would have some vigor in him. But the mysterious man seemed like he did not have any substance from the start. Before leaving, the mysterious man told Hong Mu-jayu that his descendant will come, then jump up using his blue power force. Hong Mu-jayu was left confused by what the mysterious man meant with his last words. What descendant? He asks. He heard a crackle, and as he looked back, the dragon statue was surrounded by a blue force and started transforming into a circle. He's baffled as to how is it possible that a force like that exists. He thought that what if the force is aimed towards a human? In Goryeo, the Gima Plateau, Nangrim Mountains, where at the edge of the cliff there is a big tree, someone spoke and complimented how good the day is and how nice the wind as well, then exposed a blue-haired man casually leaning with his arm behind his head as a pillow on one branch of the tree. A young woman called his name. He asked Dan Sayu, climb the tree again. He called the young girl Nuna, which means older sister. He asks if she wants to climb up too. Gung Mui cannot climb high places like trees. She also added that Dan Sayu must be the only one in the village that can climb that tree. Dan Sayu encourages her that she would like the view of the sky. It's awesome how it looks from up there. Gung Mui, holding her baskets with vegetables, assures him that she's fine and that he should come down. Sen should be coming now. They should head towards her house and have lunch together. Dan Sayu quickly jumped off the tree branch, landing on his feet besides his Nuna. By that he was scolded that he might injure himself. Dan Sayu doesn't care, he has his Nuna to take care of his injuries anyway. Dan Sayu is old enough to be mature by now, but it seems like that's still far away. In Nangrim Mountain, there is the Gung village just below it. When they arrived at the village, people started whispering about Dan Sayu. They called him shameless, he should not be in the Gung village, especially because he is from the Dan clan. The whispers did not stop Dan Sayu from hearing them. They aren't really tired of bad-mouthing him whenever he's at the village. He looks like he's used to it. Muei shyly apologized and wanted to just go home quickly. Before they could go any further, a man named Sudiok appeared and asks if he's hanging out with Dan Sayu again. He reminded her that she is in a marriageable age. The fact that she still hasn't gotten herself a husband is because she kept hanging out with the outsider pertaining to Dan. Dan Sayu casually shows his mocking smile and teased Sudiok that he couldn't even poop and pee by himself until he was 8 years old. He added that Sudiok should start taking care of himself if he wants to get married. Seems like Sudiok is pissed by his words. He grabbed Dan Sayu's collar and told him if he wanted to meet his father in the afterlife. Sudiok heard that Dan Sayu's father is a deserter. How dare a deserter's kid teased him like that? He reminded Dan Sayu that he is older than him and that he should be called Hyungnam, which means older brother. Sudiok asks again what Dan Sayu called him again. A shadow of a man appeared behind Sudiok and answered his question instead, calling him Dung Sudiok Hyungnim. Sudiok's face looks like he heard a ghost. The big man grabbed the neck part of his collar like a kitten. Jiok-san reasoned that Sudiok was blocking the narrow path, so he couldn't pass at all. Muei quickly instructed Jiok-san to put him down, because he can't use force. Muei and Dan Sayu's left dumbfounded as Jiok-san followed and threw him aside. The village chief's voice echoed as she saw what had happened to Sudiok just to save Dan Sayu. She then questioned if he is a Gung or a Dan pertaining to the clans. The chief village went silent as Jiok-san handed her a letter from Hyung Rai Nim. Nim is used to address a respectful title. It seemed important, so Jiok-san gave it to her straight away. Jiok-san and others bid their goodbye, but the chief of the village is busy examining the letter. After reading the letter, her eyes widened. Dan Sayu noticed, but did not bother to care. The chief village turned around to ask if Jiok-san read the letter, but found no trace of them. The chief village then threw a fit. She would kick him out of the Gung clan if Jiok-san kept acting like that because of Dan Sayu. At Mui's house, it shows the dead animal on the ground. Jiok-san is preparing it, but Dan Sayu keeps complaining of how hungry he was. Dan Sayu has so much complaining for someone who's there for a free meal. Jiok-san suggested helping him. Jiok-san diverted the topic to his Nuna. She was shocked to how did Jiok-san knew about the guy she was seeing. He asks if he was the one she is going to marry. She should introduce him to Jiok-san. Dan Sayu is confused. He didn't know that his Nuna is seeing someone. Matter of fact, everyone in the village knew that she was seeing a guy from the So clan who sells silk. Jiok-san asks if they liked each other. Meanwhile, Dan Sayu besides her is still shocked about what he was hearing. Muei feeling defensive, she didn't agree about them liking each other. She blushed of the thought. When Jiok-san asks if she is going to marry him, Muei clarify that it is true she was seeing someone, but the place where he stays is far from their village, so they can't meet frequently. They haven't yet talked enough to know each other well, so everything is moving slowly. She assures them to not get worried because she did research about him and it seems like he is a hardworking person, has a good reputation overall and seems like a good guy. After hearing that, Dan Sayu let out a sigh. Jiok-san then added that they should wait for a little while and if she likes him, he is always ready to give her away. It is already sunset and Dan Sayu still thinks about his Nuna's marriage, indeed that she is already at the marriageable age. In the middle of the forest, there is a path leading to a simple house with fences. Inside of the house was Dan Sayu. He is standing in front of the window with his bow. He looked to his side and saw Muei Nuna sleeping. While looking at her, he utters that he will be right back. He walked outside but then stopped when he was called by his name. He looked back curiously and found Jiok-san. He's more muscular than Sanyu, wearing a shirt exposing his bare chest and belly. Jiok-san asks if it is because of Nuna's marriage that he is going outside in the middle of the night to go to the mountain. Dan Sayu also asks Jiok-san if he is going to sell the leather he collected. He agrees. He is going to give it to Nuna as a gift when she gets married. Dan Sayu crossed his arms and they continued talking. If Muei Nuna will get married, what will Jiok-san do? He always said that he would devote himself to the army. Jiok-san did agree. Jiok-san then asks Sayu how long will he stay in the house. If Nuna will get married and he would really enter the army, Sanyu will be all alone. With his hands together, he said that although Gunga village is a place where people with the same family name as him live together, he thinks that the place where they live is where people don't give a f to humanity. Jiok-san do feel the goosebumps knowing he has the same surname as those people. They both knew that Dan Sayu can't leave the place until he got 20, because that's the promise he made to his late father. He shows a small smile and whoosh Jiok Sanduan jokingly said that his hands and feet hear his persistence of making useless ideas to stay. He heard enough and told Jiok Dansu to prepare for the army. He assures him that he will take good care of Nuna until he leaves the village. If those same surname people do something bad to Nuna, he will manage it, because they are family. Jiok Dansu smiled and held his laughter. He lightened up the mood and told Dan Sayu to wake up. He'd rather flee from the barracks than leave his precious sister to a good-for-nothing like him. Dan Sayu protested because he can't believe that he was called good-for-nothing. Jiok Dansu cleared his words and said that what he meant was he would like to thank him and Muei for always being there whenever he is in trouble. Dan Sayu accepted his reason and sarcastically said that he must have a pure heart, such a sly bastard. Nuna Muei woke up. She smiled hearing their conversation. Dan Sayu having enough of their useless conversation and bid goodbye. He will now go and dig up wild ginseng even if it's winter, just for the wedding expenses. It might take a few days. He held his bow. Feeling determined, he assured Jiok Dansu not to worry. Jiok Dansu felt that he had nothing to worry about. Besides, Dan Sayu is second to him when it comes to hunting and strength. He teased him that what surprises him is how much strength Dan Sayu has with that skinny body he has. Dan Sayu did not take his mocking and casually asked what's surprising about that. He got back at him and said that what's even more surprising is how Jiok Dansu is also 16 years old like him. Jiok Dansu felt quite pissed by that. Dan Sayu brushes it off, his face more serious, and said that they should definitely make Muei Nuna happy. He will make that happen. Then he shall go now and start walking. While he can still Dan Sayu, Jiok Dansu shouted if there's an extra wild ginseng, he should just give it to him. He's been feeling empty for days. While walking, Dan Sayu held his hands up and told him that he should not cry over a big bear anymore. He arrived at the village in the forest. He was stopped by someone who was standing not too far away from him. The man called him Dan Bastard, then asked what he was doing late at night. Dan Sayu notices him, which he calls Gung Sudiok. Gung Sudiok did not seem to like how he is called by his name. He emphasizes that he should call him Hyungnam, cracking his knuckles. He threatens Dan Su about shutting his mouth that night. He continues mocking Dan Su that he is nothing without Jiok-san. Dan Sayu's face shows that he is unaffected by Gung Sudiok's remorse. He was seen as trash and yet he was ordered to call him Hyungnam. Dan Sayu then scared him by asking about the letter sent by Hyungrai. When he saw her expression, it seemed important, he said. Gung Sudiok then again called him Dan Bastard and asked what it has to do with him. He noticed the village chief appeared. She is an old woman with a stick supporting her. Seems like she heard the conversation and said that the letter has nothing to do with the Gung family and it has nothing to do with Dan. She then let Dan Sayu go where he is supposed to go. Dan Sayu said nothing and carried on to his destination. Looking at Dan Sayu walking away, Gung Sudiok shouted and tried to stop him. Hearing the village chief say let him go made him pissed. The village chief then smiled cunningly, showing her one tooth. She reminded him that even if he don't step up, Dan Sayu will leave on his own. She means that he'll become corpse anyway if he comes to meet Hyungrai. The sound of the running horses is heard. Under the night sky shows a blue flag with a symbol. At the top is a figure like fire. The center is a full moon. At the bottom is the crescent moon. There are monks walking holding the flag, torches. Some are riding the horses. They are on their way to the top of the mountain. A man is shown riding a horse. He looked dangerous with his scarf shaped like a dog wrap around his neck and a scar visible across his face. He is Yuan's special warrior. Dan Sayu is in shock when he arrives at his destination. He can't believe that he found it already. He thought that it would take him at least 100 years. He pulled the ginseng and found out that it has 2 roots. He cheerfully held it up to the sky and announced that he had already found it and thought that he had such good luck. But then later came his bad luck. It was turning sunset and foggy. He couldn't go back quickly. While walking, lost in his thoughts, he saw a smoke ahead. He curiously followed the smoke and thought who would have gone deep in the mountains. He walks carefully, checking where it must be coming from. He peeked in the bush and saw an old man. He looked like meditating. He didn't seem to be lost. Dan Sayu stared at him. The mysterious man doesn't look dangerous, but Dan Sayu felt uneasy. This odd man filled his thoughts. The man is there, however he felt like he is only visible in his eyes but actually doesn't exist. His nervousness crawled in him. It would be normal at first to be wary of someone in the mountains. He's sweating and his eyes widened as the mysterious man suddenly spoke. The mysterious man opened his eyes and showed his crystal-like blue eyes. He feels uncomfortable while Dan Sayu keeps sneaking on him even though he is unarmed. The mysterious man demanded him to come out or much worse be dragged out. Dan Sayu felt the tension. He was sweating and nervously laughing. He awkwardly shows himself with both arms held up while asking the mysterious man if he could stay until dawn because it is getting dark and foggy. It's like ice poured into Dan Sayu as the mysterious man makes him sit. As it is getting darker in the mountains, Dan Sayu offers the mysterious man a mushroom and a stick. They are in the middle of the woods, therefore Dan Sayu couldn't treat him to a proper meal. The mysterious man eyed the mushroom given to him, then took a teeny tiny bite. Dan saw you look at him thinking he's not that hungry. The mysterious man felt his stare and told him that the body could not properly absorb the nutrient it needed if it is not chewed properly, so instead eat slowly and properly, because even a small amount of food can give you enough strength to move. The mysterious man then asks about Dan Sa-yu. While chewing, Dan Sa-yu introduced himself, his name, and that he lived in Gangda village under Hong and Ryong. The mysterious man then piqued his interest about where Dan Sa-yu's live. He asks if Dan Sa-yu is talking about the Hwayonmin village. He heard that only the Gung family can live there. It surprises him that a Dan surname is living there. Dan Sa-yu, scratching the back of his head, and said it is because of certain circumstances. The mysterious man looks at him side-eye and quickly sees Dan Sa-yu's fear hidden with a smile. He finds it quite interesting. Dan Sa-yu becomes wary as the mysterious man seems to read what's on his mind. The mysterious man's colored eyes makes him scared. Dan Sa-yu then smiled and quickly changed the topic. He asks where the mysterious man is going. The place is high in the mountains and no ordinary people dare to come there. The mysterious man became silent for a while, then with his crystal-like blue eyes, he's on his way to kill someone. Dan Sa-yu is surprised about the revelation. He does not seem to understand why, so he told him that even if the mysterious man is sick of living, he still needs to live in the right way. The mysterious man then smile and laugh. He doesn't do such thing as giving up life. He doesn't even deserve to kill himself. He is going to finish his long journey, and at the end of his journey, he will just wait and dies. Dan Sa-yu can't find the words to speak. The mysterious man then casually said that he ate well. It's been a long time since he ate something good. Dan Sa-yu remained silent. He lay down on the grass with his arms beneath his head, thinking what's wrong with that mysterious man. Was he saying that he is going to die? Dan Sa-yu eyed the mysterious man because he can't believe that he talks about his own death so casually. The night has passed and morning comes. Dan Sa-yu stood up and walked ahead. He looked back at the mysterious guy and he left him one ginseng he picked. On his way, he was going insane about what he just did. He could have bought hundreds of rice if the ginseng was really 100 years old. He felt ridiculous as to why he gave it to that mysterious man. It's probably because that mysterious man said he was going to die. It makes people upset. It made him upset. Dan Sa-young sighed of the thought. Now he doesn't know what to do. Looking at the sky, he comforted himself that since he has one ginseng root left, it should be enough. It seems like the other one wasn't meant for him. Still feeling pity, he walks on his way home. Arriving at the village, he found no one. Then in a glimpse, behind him is Gung Su-deok aiming a punch at Dan Sa-yu. In full speed, Dan Sa-yu is hit to the ground, feeling the pain. He did not predict it to happen. Gung Su-deok held him down and finally caught him. Dan Sa-yu is surprised to see the village chief. She said that if Dan Sa-yu just left on his own, he wouldn't be treated that way. She remarked that it is for everyone in the village. She ordered to lock him up and not let him get in the way. Dan Sa-yu is confused of what is happening. He doesn't understand what is it that he will get in the way of. Gung Su-deok replied with a smirking face. Hyung-rai is coming to the village. The capital sent him to manage the village. He is like a king. Dan Sa-yu still hasn't any idea what it have to do with him. Hyung-rai is coming with an envoy from Yuan, and it is said that they can personally choose a princess to enter Yuan, and they are thinking of sending Gung Muei. Dan Sa-yu's eyes widened as he heard what Gung Su-deok just said. He bit off his fingers, and as if in cue, Gung Su-deok was caught off monk. That's the time where Dan Sa-yu hit his face using his elbow. He got up quickly, brings out his weapon, kicks him, then lands on him. He used his bow and arrow and aimed to Gung Su-deok's face. Dan Sa-yu thought that there was nothing he could do if the people hated him without any reason. He thought it was because of his different surname. Dan Sa-yu endured when everyone called his father a coward deserter because it was the truth. His father ran away anyway, and the truth that the village took him and his father when they had nowhere to go. Chief Village then interfered, and she commanded Dan Sa-yu. Dan Sa-yu then looked at her and aimed his bow and arrow. He released his arrow and hit the Chief Village stick, scratching his cheek, leaving a blood. She can't help but curse at him. Although Dan Sa-yu's father ran away while gritting his teeth, he's grateful for what he learned from him. How to run away, how to chase, and how to hunt. He can definitely do all those things better than anyone in the village. With his raging eyes, he threatened that whoever comes at him first, their head will be pierced. The Chief Village is furious and other people couldn't even dare to step forward. The Chief Village wanted Dan Sa-yu to leave the village, and he will do just as she wishes. He will leave the village with Muei and Jiok-san. Dan Sa-yu then ran as fast as he could. The chief of the village couldn't do anything but shout, making him stop where he was. With his bleeding nose, Gung Su-deok called the chief village that the UN envoy will be arriving soon. Their village will be exterminated once Muei runs away. The chief village then ordered the people to go after Dan Sa-yu, but then they become terrified seeing the UN's envoy has arrived. Running for his life, Dan Sayu quickly called upon Muei. Not knowing what's happening, Muei invited Dan Sayu to eat lunch with them. Afraid that they will be caught by the village people, they don't have time to eat. Muei must prepare to leave now. Muei panicked as she saw Dan Sayu's face bleeding and asked what happened. In a hurry, he took a few clothes to bring. Worried Muei, she asks if he encountered an animal in the mountain. She offered to treat it first. Dan Sayu quickly answered that they do not have time for that. They have a wild ginseng, which means they can hang out there for a while. Dan Sayu then asks where Jiok-san might be. Muei said that Jioksu is out in the mountains to get wood, then asks what is going on. Dan Sayu felt annoyed. He pulled Muei and made sure that he will explain everything later on. They bolted to go to Jiok-san first. Muei was shocked by how fast they were running and dropped her baskets full of vegetables. While escaping, Dan Sayu spotted the Yuan's envoy at the village. He is startled as he met the eyes of the man with a scar on his face. Dan Sayu is determined to not lose his Nuna to those bastards. The scar-faced man watches as they run. He notices the woman and orders his people to catch the woman. His people ask what to do with the guy. The scar-faced man doesn't care if they killed the guys as long as they capture the woman and bring her without a scratch. She may hold Yuan's fate someday. The people quickly understood the command and jumped off their horses. The village people were stunned. They were flying above their heads. The scar-faced man shows his smirk, recalling what he saw. He is intrigued by Dan Sayu. He was a bastard who didn't learn martial arts. He will become an interesting hunter. Dan Sayu and Muei run as fast as they could, but still caught up by the flying warriors. They were persistent, and so Dan Sayu aimed and blew his bow and arrow at them, but was surprised by how quickly they split the arrow in half. The warrior quickly lunged at Dan Sayu, making him fall to the ground while the other warrior placed his hand around Mui's mouth to silence her. Dan Sayu couldn't do anything but to call on his Nuna. The warrior pointed the tip of his sword right at the center of Dan Sayu's eye. He could kill Dan Sayu in a heartbeat. A punch is thrown at the warrior's face, revealing a big guy carrying firewood on his back. The other warrior is frightened seeing his fellow warrior get hit. Seeing the face of the big guy, it was Jiok-san, asking who those dangerous-looking bastards were. Dan Sayu then told Jiok-san about the bastards that came from Yuan. The letter that Jiok-san brought from Hyangrai before was about offering Muei as a princess. Dan Sayu suggested that they should take Muei to the Jiokrangbong Peak. It would be hard for them to keep up there. The Yuan's enjoyment is quite enjoyable at the moment, seeing them having a hard time. He sarcastically offered help. They are worrying on the inside and lunge at them. They won't be having a nice death. Jiok-san's eyes are rage. He can't believe that the Gung village became desperate and chose to sell a family member out to become a princess. He is determined to not let his Nuna send to those barbarians. Jiok-san draws his axe and throws firewood at the Yuan's warriors. The warrior is thrilled to fight a spirited young man. The Yuan's warrior doesn't have enough time to waste on Jiok-san and Dan Sayu. They should die immediately. Jiok-san is not an easy opponent. He counterpart the warrior's sword with his axe. He challenges the warrior to kill them if he can. The warrior did not expect Jiok-san's strength. Then he twisted around, aiming the sword at Jiok-san's neck, but then he quickly avoided it. Dan Sayu step on Jiok-san's shoulder and jump above his head, his bow and 2 arrows pointing at the warrior. Dan Sayu quickly blow his 2 arrows at him, but the Yuan's warrior simply split it in half, calling it a poor act. It made him distracted, and it's Jiok-san's cue to throw a punch on the warrior's stomach, making his body hit a hard tree. He was surprised, and by the time he looked at them, a flying arrow is on its way to hit him, but then he dodged it. Without noticing that there are 2 arrows, the other one hit his legs. The other Yuan's warrior laugh at how surprising the kids are. The Yuan's envoy suddenly appeared, hearing the laughter of the warrior echoing throughout the Gima Plateau. The Yuan's envoy concluded that the warriors are enjoying the situation. It's been a while since he ordered the warrior to come and get them, but nothing happened until now. He can't imagine that Yuan's elite warriors are struggling against some youngsters from Goryeo. The warrior asks for his forgiveness and he will be held responsible. The warrior tremble is what the Yuan's envoy said. Moving forward, the Yuan's envoy is surprised. The incompetence of the Yuan's warriors was surprising. He continued walking as a powerful force suddenly surrounded him. The fact that they can withstand that much with just a simple way of attacking, which is not even a good technique. It's a shame that they have to be called a person from useless Goryeo, Yuan's envoy said while grinning. A powerful energy suddenly surrounds them. Jiok-san then shouts with determination. He will never let anyone take his Nuna. If they want her, they would have to kill them first. In a blink of an eye, the Yuan's envoy is in front of them, and with his one hand he touched Jiok-san. That made him wide-eyed and shiver. The Yuan's envoy grinned, then used his one hand to push him. Jiok-san was sent off flying and hit a tree. The tree cracked and Jiok-san passed through it. Jiok-san were crashed down to the ground and tremble with his mouth and nose bleeding. Dan Sayu called Jiok-san's name but was stopped when the Yuan's envoy told him that he can't afford to worry about others. Dan Sayu shivers and then quickly tried to blow his bow and arrow. It successfully tore the Yuan's envoy upper cape but then quickly moved to use his hands to blow him off. A loud thump was heard. Dan Sayu whiz and hit the ground rolling. The Yuan's envoy asks if Dan Sayu is still alive. He is a bastard with such a strong build. It is such a waste of talent, he added. He grabbed and took off his now torn cape. While looking down to the poor Dan Sayu trembling, he will take Muei to Yuan, and they don't have a choice but to die in the forests. While grinning, he reminded him that although they can't choose or change anything, at least they can choose who would die first. Jiaxin seemed to recover and stood up. Seeing Dan Sayu on the ground made him even more furious. His eyes darkened. He can't let anyone touch Dan Sayu. With all his strength, he grabbed the tree with his one hand. He grabbed and lifted the tree and threw it towards the Yuan's envoy. The Yuan's envoy is strong. He used one punch to meet the incoming tree. He broke it and split it in half. He smiled at how his temper was provoked by Jiaxin's act. In a queue, the Yuan's envoy is glaring at Jiaxin. He had decided to kill him first. He swift and hit Jiaxin's face with his knee. The flying Jiaxin was then again kicked to the ground. Dan Sayu could not take the sight of Jiaxin. He dashed and jumped then swerved to hit the Yuan's envoy, only to be grabbed by his feet and smash him to the ground. The Yuan's envoy sarcastically told Dan Sayu to wait patiently because he will be the next one to be killed in a more special way. Seeing the two crash to the ground, Muei can't help but watch. The Yuan's envoy walked towards Dan Sayu while he talks about how he adores people like them. Their undaunted spirit, because they had to get to that point to be called a man. Not being able to finish his sentence, he was grabbed by Jiaxin, which made him stop and look behind. Jiaxin still has his determined eyes, looks at him and says to not touch Dan Sayu. Jiaxin quickly receive a strong punch from the Yuan's envoy. Jiaxin could not help but to feel the pain. While the Yuan's envoy hands still thrust at his face, he did not bulge. Glaring him, he was able to continue his words of not touching both Dan Sayu and Muei. Jiaxin took the courage to grab the Yuan's hands on his face and prepare to hit him with a punch. Next thing he knew, the Yuan's envoy is nowhere to be hit. He moved so fast that he was already behind Jiaxin. He grabbed Jiaxin behind and held him aloft, which made him arch his back screaming in pain. Dan Sayu called Jiaxin. Walking towards the cliff, he continued his speech of how he adores people like them who have an undaunted spirit. But what he adores more is to destroy that spirit and body completely. He held Jiaxin with his one hand. While trembling, Jiaxin found his words and called Dan Sayu. He left a word to take care of Muei Nuna. Muei shouts his name but Yuan's envoy throws him completely off the cliff. Dan Sayu ran towards the cliff and he painfully called his Jiaxin. The Yuan's envoy commented that he doesn't need to be sad, because he will catch up with him soon enough. Dan Sayu was heartbroken and still calling Jiaxin's name. He cried as if he was waiting for him to answer. His trembling eyes turn into a beast and swiftly move, lunging at his opponent. His opponent was caught off monk by his sudden movement. Fortunately, he managed to kick and hit his opponent. He thumped his opponent's face that made him whiz. Dan Sayu throw a strong punch. His opponent was unable to escape and was smacked on the face. Yuan's warriors were surprised by the sudden change of situation. Dan Sayu continuously thump his opponent to let his anger out. Dan Sayu's face is full of blood, the tear on his one eye while a lump on the other one shows what he had gone through. He was baffled when his opponent grabbed his arm. Yuan envoy suddenly spoke. He said that by now Dan Sayu got over his anger caused by the loss of his friend, and now he can die without any regret. Then in a glimpse of an eye, Dan Sayu is already up in the air ready to be thrown. He was lifted like a piece of paper and thrown in a blast. Dan Sayu's body was sent flying and crashed on the ground. Muei can't help but to be teary-eyed as she witnessed Dan Sayu's body. Dan Sayu trembled and felt the pain. Yuan's envoy also felt the pain even though Sayu didn't know anything about martial arts. He wiped off the blood on his mouth and widely grinned. He thought to himself that Sayu looked like he could entertain him. In a queue, a clatter of a chain is heard. A long chain and a blade on its end were visible. Yuan's envoy will face him wholeheartedly then shoot it out towards Sayu. Yuan's envoy used the chain to make Sayu stand. Sayu seems like he doesn't feel the pain of the chain. He was lost in the thought that his friend, Jiaxu, is gone. The image of Jiaxu falling off the cliff keeps repeating in his mind. Despite the blood all over his body, his thoughts are still lost as to why are these things happening. To Muei, to himself. He desperately asks what's wrong with them, why do they have to go through that? An image of the Yuan's envoy with his wide grin shows up in his mind. Why do they have to go to their indistinctive village and force Muei Nuna to be a princess? Under the pink moon, Dan Sayu's both arms were hanging between the two branches of a large tree. He notices Jiak Rangbong the blood wolves growling below, trying to get to him and chew him for dinner. Suddenly a blue flare appeared and then a foot showed up and he heard a familiar voice. It was the mysterious man that spoke. He claimed that Sayu looked healthy last night, but seeing him now he looks awful. Sayu is shocked by the sudden appearance of the mysterious man that he calls elder. Then the elder wanted to know if he wanted to live. Standing in front of the wolves, they growl at him, their hungry eyes craving for the elder's blood. In sync they roar and attach the elder. The elder gritted his teeth and a blue flare was visible. He's concerned if Sayu is still alive. In a swift, his hand covered with blue flare grabs one wolf on its jaw. It seems like electricity run through the wolf's body and crashes it. The roars of the other wolves did not stop. The elder released a blue flare that crushed the remaining wolves. After clearing the area, the elder looks up at Dan Sayu's weakened body. Keeping a serious face, the elder asks again if he wanted to live even if he has to suffer more than in hell. Dan Sayu replied, his precious friend died and his Nuna has been taken away by the barbarians. Even though he is weak, he managed to smile and added that he can't do anything. All he can do is to wait for his death, so even if it's worse than hell, could it be possibly worse than what he is going through right now? At that moment, the elder immediately shot out his blue flare, releasing Dan Sayu from the chains. He fell and catched by the elder. While he was in the elder's arms, he told Dan Sayu is very lucky. Even though he was in so much pain, he still managed to smile. His smile is what saved his life. The elder added not to lose those smiles. The elder lay him down to the ground to examine his condition. Dan Sayu has 35 broken bones and 70 parts of his muscles were damaged. The elder made him choose whether he will stay that way for the rest of his life or he will be able to recover his precious healthy body. Struggling for his life, Da Sayu managed to ask the elder why he saved him. The elder showed him the ginseng Dan Sayu gave. The wild ginseng he gave out of compassion saved his life. He clenched the wild ginseng with his blue flare that became a blue liquid. He drops the blue liquid into Sayu's mouth. Then the elder told him that in their body there are 106 bones and 650 muscles. Once he figure out the function and role of each of them, he will be able to control them completely. The elder releases his blue flare and scatters it to Sayu's body. The sound of whiz can be heard as his body feels the electricity. He told Sayu that he is in a very good state now because he can't move. His nerves are standing on end. Then added, Sayu needs to try to understand his condition and understand his whole body, inability to move hands and feet, the heart that beats intensely, those are the conditions that will distract your nerves. Dan Sayu's pupils began to shrink. His body is in suspended animation. He will be able to feel all the conditions as his 36 major veins unclog, which means it is the condition in which all signs of life, vitality seem to be absent although the person still remains alive. Dan Sayu's body is covered with blue flare and the electricity that is going through his entire body. As the words being recited, such as the extent of the finger bones, how the muscles are woven, the sound of joints colliding, the sound of the internal organs moving, the sound of breathing, and the sound of blood flowing correspond to the changes of Sayun's body. The elder kneeled down and said that if he can feel and hear all of them, not just the 36 major veins, he will be able to understand all the 360 veins. Then asks if Sayu understood. Knowing the bones and muscles is the way to figure out which part they need to cut off in order to create a destructive shape that they want, which blood vessels they should insert their energy into so that they can cause the body to collapse. Dan Sayu shouts in pain. When he gets enlightened about all of that, he will be able to gain the martial arts of the supernatural being and if he can get the ghost eye. The elder squinted his eyes and let Sayu know that he will be reborn as the heavenly artillery general. In Goryeo, where Myoyong Mountain is located, there is a cave where you can see smoke indicating someone is arriving. Goryeo is now hopeless because of the nobles who desire power without thinking about the hardships of the people. The country is now incapable of recovering. That's why the appearance of the armed young man named Lai is so meaningful. The old and corrupt Goryeo was abandoned, and a new nation was established that is no different from heaven's will. A swoosh is heard showing smoke all around. As expected from the Haedong's immortal swordsman, the worried countrymen were impressed. Haedong means a city in western China. Then a man appeared. He started off by saying that he was the one who asked the guest to come and yet he is late himself. The guest is the Haedong's immortal swordsman, Park Jong-mo. He is wearing an all-black cloak. He was delighted to be invited by the wise man. He is curious as to why he is invited. Perhaps it's for the sake of the new country. Then, is it about the decision of the armed man Lai? He continues saying that the heavens will that the ruler of the country should change. The three transcendents agree with Haedong's immortal swordsman's suggestion as well. The Monkean deity is worried about one thing. When the young warrior Lai gained freedom to control his power, there were rumors that he was trying to pretend to be part of the three transcendents. The wise honored master, Yu, completely understands the expectations and concerns of them both. He requested for the both of them to be present. He was sure that they already knew that a substantial number of innocent people lost their lives all through the year. Recently, Iron Force's 7 land deities and Cheonpo Mountain's Chial-sanya died. There are a variety of disciples here in Goryeo, but only a few of them are qualified and virtuous people. The 7 land deities rose to their position because of their outstanding performances. According to the surviving disciple of the land deities, a man at the center of the strong force of wind whirling and an old man just outside of it staring. A young man and an old man came to see the land deities. They said that they had unfold the etched martial arts. It is a combination of magic and martial arts. It's the only technique that can kill the land deities. As the wind keeps getting stronger, the 7 land deities, the excellent among the excellents. But days later, Goryeo's land deities' etched martial arts that took a decade to complete was destroyed in a matter of days, and another skill was revealed, where the cardiovascular system could be torn into pieces. That's how the lives of the land deities ended. And Cheonpo Mountain's Cheol his wonderful and miraculous powers, and above all, no human strength could pierce through his defense or avoid his attack. The boundless wall. Even though they ridicule him, no one knows that old man's identity. Images show the familiar blue flare killing people, piercing through them. There were not even any physical remains of Cheol. The wise honored Master Lyoning continued that if a lot of innocent people have lost their lives over the past year because of an unknown old man, then the situation must be getting very serious. Instead of establishing a new country, the land's path to immortality might get cut off. Haedong's immortal swordsman, Park Jong-mo, grumble as he is terrified. He thinks that it is impossible. Who in Goryeo would do such arrogant things to innocent people? He asks. The Monkean deity gritted his teeth as he concluded that the royal family of Goryeo noticed their plan. It is not easy to find someone who could kill righteous people in a matter of days even if you're from the royal family. Jang Yu replies if the two of them forgot about someone's existence. 10 years ago, 30 innocent people were gathered for a cowardly attack. Rather than killing, 1/3 of the innocent people got killed instead. A man with familiar crystal-like blue eyes is shown. They call him the evil spirit, Han-mu-beak. The heavenly artillery general returned from hell, along with his disciple, which then showed a hand touching a tree, none other than Dan Sa-yu. The heavenly artillery general, Han-mu-beak and Dan Sa-yu are training. Those who have mastered it were called the heavenly artillery generals, a traditional martial art that has been handed down for over thousands of years. The heavenly artillery generals' techniques evolved from an ancient martial art technique. The body's frame, muscles, and the blood vessels. You need to figure out and see which part of you can break and destroy as you wish. It all starts by knowing which blood vessels to stimulate that can cause the human body to collapse. A technique founded upon the method of splitting the muscles from bones where the damaged area's arteries should be stimulated, and then the bones and muscles should be twisted. It is called the 10 damage point, where Han-mu-beak utilized it by just touching Dan Sa-yu's elbow. Then it quickly snapped. Dan Sa-yu was too slow to avoid it, as his arm cracked and snapped. Han-mu-beak told him that he should remember it with his body and not with his head. Dan Sa-yu's arms were twisted, and before he could even notice, he was hit again by his trainer 2 fingers, which shoved him away. Han-mu-beak reminded him that even though he is tired, doesn't mean that his enemy is tired as well. He will move until he dies. Dan Sa-yu is panting. There are no particular methods for a heavenly artillery general. Just tightening, ravaging, breaking joints, and damaging muscle, Han-mu-beak added. But, even though Dan Sa-yu is still unskilled, he understands the basics of becoming a heavenly artillery general. Han-mu-beak shows another technique. His eyes flares with his blue lightning. Dan Sa-yu were startled at the sudden movement. It was so fast that Han-mu-beak already reached Dan Sa-yu and whispered to his ear, the Thunder Kai technique. It is the root of 10 damage points and the heavenly artillery general's technique. He used it on Dan Sa-yu, and then again, he was sent flying off. Dan Sa-yu was able to slide and stand against the force. It was painful as he sees a hole in his body. If the 10 damage points is the foundation of a heavenly artillery general, then the foundation of Thunder Kai is control. His trainer originally supposed to wake him up slowly and safely, but he doesn't have time. He needs to survive to regain everything he had lost. Half a year later, in the reigning Myeoyang Mountain, where the honored master's divine cultivation place is located, Dan Sa-yu and Han-mu-beak visited. The monks stopped them halfway of the bridge and were called the disciple of the evil spirit. They should stop killing people and get out of there. They are talking about Lyoning. How dare they stand in his way? Han-mu-beak replied. One of the monks said that the honored master gave strict orders to keep evil men from intervening in the situation, and that includes the evil spirit's disciple. They will not stand still if ever that the visitors will disobey the honored master's orders. The bald monk ordered his fellow men to attack the visitors. Together, they began approaching the two. Dan Sa-yu's hands glow like a blue lightning. He is now surrounded with the strong force. He remembered what Han-mu-beak told him. If he can become a master in controlling Thunder Kai, he will be able to obtain the ghost eyes. While Han-mu-beak's words are still lingering in his head, if he can apply 10 damage points to Thunder Kai, he will become a true heavenly general. He smiled widely as his eyes began to glow blue. In the reigning Mount Myeoyang, you can hear the rambling and the sound of fighting. The monks must stop the two from meeting the wise honored master no matter what happens. People are flying and already aloft as Dan Sayu fought each one of them. He gracefully swift and the cracking sound is caused by his opponent's bone being crushed. Han Mubik stood there and thought about the flowing blood veins. It's a movement of blood in the bloodstream of the human body. Stimulating it will cause extreme pain and will cause the muscle to twist on their own. He was lost in his thoughts as he heard the monks called him an evil spirit and wanted to knock him out to stop him from meeting the wise honored master. He easily struck his blue flare lightning onto the huge rock on the bridge. Just as there are flowing blood veins in the human body, there are also nerves similar to flowing blood veins in the objects around us. The enemy was surrounded with the blue flare lightning. If they stimulate the center of those nerves with thunder kai, they will be able to destroy a huge mountain. A loud crash and thud was heard as the rock collapsed. The monks began running for their life not to get struck by the huge rock and fall off the bridge. The two stepped further and yet again stopped by the men that monks the sacred place. It is where the wise honored master cultivates his skill. The two were threatened to leave the place immediately before the monks killed the disciple of the evil spirit pertaining to them. The Baomen continue saying that the wise honored master is the last descendant of the Balhi kingdom who made great accomplishments in this land. He said that if the two turned a blind eye to that matter, they'll be in a nirvana state that happened 10 years ago, so they must get rid of their anger. Nirvana, or the final goal of Buddhism, it is a transcendent state. There is neither suffering, desire, nor sense of self. Also the subject is released from the effects of karma. Han Mubik questions Sayu if he could do that. He reminded Sayu that if he interfere, their resentment can be a lifelong burden upon him. The monks decided that if the two had no intention of leaving, the monk would have to use his strength to stop them. Then, they lunge and attack to punish the evil spirits. Sayu released his blue flare lightning and assured Han Mubik not to worry because he prepared himself for that moment when he decided to be the heavenly artillery general, and showed his grin. While Sayu swiftly moves towards his opponents, he remembers the lesson that his master has given him. No matter what the excuse is, murder is a sin. It's a fact that won't change, and still, if he has to resort to it, he will not hesitate. He blasted his power towards his opponent and they did not escape the lightning force that struck their body. The man that is still standing becomes extremely angry and asks if he is trying to be their enemy. He jumps, dashes, moves, and swings his weapon to Sayu. Sayu quickly dashed and replied that his master has already become the enemy of all the predecessors of the land. Sayu drifts and rotates himself upwards. The enemy's weapon hits the ground. While uttering the word he is the disciple, how can he be scared just because of Mount Moyang? The enemy swirls his weapon to create force and strike it to Sayu's body. Failing to do so, Suyu smiled and used what he learnt. He gripped the weapon, making the enemy tremble, and widened his eyes to see how impossible it was. The weapon surrounded by Sayu's power began to crack. The enemy let go of his weapon and jumped to strike a kick to Sayu. He was able to block it, and the moment his leg touched Sayu's hand, he was sent off flying by the Thunder Kai technique executed by Sayu and felt the excruciating pain. His fellow monk became scared of what they saw. They caught Sayu standing with his bright crystal blue eyes. It is the ghost eyes. Sayu standing holding his opponent's one leg. He mocked as he was told before to get rid of his anger. His opponent was crippled because of his lost leg. He gritted his teeth while saying that it has been 10 years past. Harming the wise honored master just because of such trivial matters would be a great loss for the land of Goryeo. Han Mubik replied that 10 years later would he be able to forgive his disciple, Sayu, who turned his leg into that. They have wasted too much time for those useless things. This time they shall go to the 3 hermits. Sayu agrees and followed his master. They are on their way to the cave. He reminded Sayu that it is never easy to harm someone. He should remember that fear to be able to improve. They entered the hermit's cave, the perfect place for Sayu's training. The byokugdan that the 3 hermits eat will be his food. Byokugdan means the food from various ingredients, usually eaten when doing fasting practice. In the future, the dozens of the shining marbles on the wall will be the expenses for his last journey. Expenses for his last journey means money, property put in the coffin for the deceased to spend on his, her way to heaven. A loud thud was heard, then appeared the wise honored master Deyoung-yu, the Monkian deity, and Haedong's immortal swordsman, Park Jong-mo. The two jumped down to face the 3 and were greeted by a long time no see. 10 years have already passed. Han Mubik has been waiting for this day to come. Deyoung-yu noticed Sayu. He complimented him about his good physique and he must be the evil spirit's disciple. He was curious as to why Han Mubik brought Sayu in the cave, as it seems like Sayu's life isn't valuable for his master. Han Mubik replied that he knows very well that the place is called the Hermit's Cave. He also knew that the place was the best place for Sayu to train. Then he boldly said that he is going to kill all 3 of them on his own hands, and after that he will let Sayu train there. The Monkian deity reminded Han Mubik that because of the great megalith that is blocking the entrance, no one will ever see the light of the world anymore. Because of his arrogance, Sayu will never see the sunlight anymore, he added. Han Mubeek sarcastically thanks him for his concern, but it has nothing to do with them since they are about to face death. Han Mubeek doesn't have much time left, so he ripped off his shirt, exposing the different pattern of lightning marked on his body. He told Sayu to open his eyes properly and focus. He should watch, feel, and remember his every movement. The muscles that follow the movements of his body, the flow of the Kai, even the damage that he gets. From now on, everything that happens there will be a valuable experience for Sayu. Sayu knew that it was his master's last battle. Feeling sad, Sayu will watch his master's last moment with his own eyes and remember it. They have been entangled with the evil destiny for a long time, and now they will put an end to the evil destiny today. The three of them jump towards Mubeek in all different angles. Each one of them are releasing their unique techniques, the spreading of large blade hands, the flowing found iron index. But they were not ready for Mubeek's powerful technique. It blasted and the three of them already felt weak. They have to do their best if they don't want to die in vain. Sayu is sitting while Mubeek is standing under the moonlight. He tells his story. Long and slender hands, smooth and delicate hand without imperfection. However, people call it an evil spirit. In order to gain these hands, he had abandoned all his emotions. He did so because that's what being a heavenly artillery general is about. Heavenly artillery general, Goryeo artillery. Demons martial arts. People call the heavenly artillery general's techniques the same as the demons martial arts. They are probably talking about the demon eyes blue light, Salsian martial arts, but to the hermits in this land, it is the martial art for killing. He repeat, a martial art for killing. In the land of Goryeo, martial arts is all about seeking leadership. That's why it will never look beautiful to them. Flashback of 10 years ago. Mubeek was attacked by 30 hermits led by the honored master, Lyoning. He was bleeding on the left side of his chest, surrounded by 30 hermits. It was a cowardly act that there are too many of them. Lyoning said that if they share the same intention, he will leave the naming of the country that they were establishing to Mubeek. The establishment of the new country and its naming has nothing to do with Mubeek. He will never forget what they did. They deceived him by calling him out to kill his wife. His daughter went missing with her nanny. Mubeek was enraged by his power and threatened that if they failed to kill him, so that was engulfed by Mubeek's power, that 1/3 of the 30 hermits died and he survived. It took him 10 years to recover from the fatal wounds they inflicted on him. He found his daughter's whereabouts, but for some reason, there were rumors that his daughter had gone to the continent. The familiar dragon statue was where he was. He tried to search for his daughter there, but even though his wounds were healing, he realized that he didn't have much time left. The familiar place where he touched his chest and murmured that if only he had a little more time. Was it only that far, the remaining time of his life? He exited and had no choice but to go back to Mushan in Lyoning province. At an old age, he saw a child, Sayu the same age as him. An image of a young girl with her long hair with no face. It is the only image Mubeek could remember. His memories became vague and his child's face was blurry. Back to the present. The three of them are struggling to fight with Mubeek. They can't guarantee their victory. Either he wins or they win. The fight will be their last one. If it is really the last, Mubeek will burn them down. The fight is getting intense. Mubeek ripped his opponent's one arm, that made him cry in pain. Mubeek released his heavenly strike that hit the three of them. They are having a hard time controlling Mubeek's power. They plan on suppressing his Thunder Kai or else their blood and energy will be drained. Just one more attack, the time that Mubeek's left will end. For the last time he let his full energy flow, released his heavenly sword, his great strike hunter, his supreme deity's palm. All three of them come forward to attack him, binding his techniques together with the heavenly burst. He unleashes his full potential, and with his final attack that causes a blinding blue light. The fight has ended. In his last, what's left is eternal sleep. Mubeek's back touched the cold rock as Sayu sat beside him. He doesn't have any regrets, except one thing, his daughter, Sang-ah. Mubeek felt sorry for leaving her alone. He left a word to Sayu that when his daughter disappeared, she did have along with a sword guidebook she had inherited from her mom. He reminisced about his daughter as she is a very intelligent child. If it was really with her, she had probably learned it already. If ever Sayu finds his daughter in the future, he wants Sayu to let her be if she's living well. And if she isn't in a good situation, he should help her once. That should be enough, he added. Sayu, contemplating what he is feeling, he accepted his master's words. Mubeek saw his face and reminded him of what he told him about his smile, to never lose it no matter what. Feeling his breath slowly fading, he manages to tell him that he doesn't need to be like him. Sayu should become his own heavenly artillery general. In this world, nothing will bind him. Sayu smiled and let his tears fall for the moment. In Mubeek's last words he said, "It is Sayu's time from now on to walk on his own." Mubeek now fell into his eternal sleep. A decade later, Sayu became a grown-up. He reminisced about the time he went through before meeting his master. How Jiok-san, his dear friend, died like that. How his Muei Nuna was taken by the Yuan barbarians. If his master wasn't there at that time, he would probably die for nothing. He glanced at his side, there laying his master's body. It has been a long time since his master fell into eternal sleep. He looks the same as that time he saved him. It's as if he's still alive. Sayu kneels and bowed down to his master. His help back then was too big and high for him to imagine with his little heart, but he will not be ashamed that he is Mu-Beak's disciple. Heavenly Artillery General 35th Victor Dan Sayu is greeting his master for the last time before he leaves. While he is still bowing down, a tear escaped in his eyes. The love that his master gave him, how can he return it, he cried. Sayu stood up sad and walked to leave. Before he could get further, a voice spoke. He turned around to see his master, and flashbacks of memories of how his master saved him left him in awe. He remembered what his master always tells him, to never lose his smile no matter what situation he might be in. Sayu will be walking on his own now, with the smile on his face. In Goryeo, a loud clunk is heard in the Myoyang mountain. Bongma Temple. They rush running and an evil spirit has awakened. Everyone gathered in the hermit's cave. A monk spoke, to keep it in their mind that it is the place in the hermit's cave where the 3 hermits sealed the evil spirit who brought disorder to the world. Their Bongma Temple monks exist to watch over the resurrection of the evil spirit, and they need to stop it. They positioned themselves into a battle stance but were startled by the shaking of the ground. The hermit's cave emit a familiar blue blinding light that engulfed them with great force. From afar, the blue light is visible. The monk is dumbfounded to see the trap that covered the entire Bongma temple is gone. The huge rock that serves as a trap was split in half that fell besides the monk. Sayu slowly walked, familiarizing his surroundings, the dust, the light and the clear sky. He was amazed and smiled at how dazzling the outside was. The monk contemplated to himself, the man he is seeing right now is the one who followed Mu-Beak and went to the hermit's cave, the evil spirit. The monk held his leg, reminiscing the pain his body felt because Sayu, he was the one who gave him the pain that will never go away. The monk was certain, 10 years ago, at the time of persecution of the hermits, the one who took away his right leg as well as the lives of many. The one who stood next to Han Mu-Beak, the evil spirit was him, the disciple of the evil spirit. Going back to Sayu, he saw an unfamiliar temple. Then a man spoke. The Bongma temple was built to block Han Mu-Beak, the evil spirit. The temple was built in honor of the 3 hermits who sacrificed themselves by destroying their own body. An old monk was revealed, Monk Wonjeong. He asked Sayu if he wanted a bloody war with the people on the land as well like the evil spirit did. Sayu calmly answered, it was the path that his master chose, but he doesn't want a war nor is he interested in it. Monk Wonjeong cleared his throat, as if he did not believe that the disciple of the evil spirit doesn't want a war. His answer is quite hard to believe and perplexed by it, he added. The younger monk asks if Monk Wonjeong really believes him. He is the disciple of the evil spirit, there's no point in listening to the bullshit. Monk Wonjeong replied that for once, they should listen to Sayu's story. After being defeated by the evil spirit, Wonjeong devoted his life to Buddhism and martial arts more than anyone. His face looks evil as if he's going to explode with anger. Wonjeong announces that his target is the disciple of the evil spirit, but actually the evil spirit himself. Even if he comes in person, Wonjeong believes that he can defeat him. Still looking calm, Sayu understands Monk Wonjeong and will deal with him later on. But first he wanted him to wait for a minute. He walked and he faced the statues built to honor the 3 hermits. He was apologetic to say it, but even though they have worked so hard to build it, it doesn't look much like them. Well, it doesn't really matters. After all, they will be gone soon. Then, Sayu lifted his hands and touched the statue. He let him power flow and released his thunder kai, and in a glimpse of an eye the statues were wrecked into pieces. He thought to himself that all this time, he had become a bad disciple. His master couldn't rest in peace because of that. But now, you can rest in peace. The monks are frightened to witness the entire hermit's cave. They felt petrified. The evil spirit's disciple has completed the evil spirit's insight. Sayu now has his charming look, as if nothing happened. He kept them waiting, and asked what they should do. He let them choose if they liked to attack him one by one or would they rather attack him all at once. Well, it doesn't really have any difference to him, so they can do as they please. Wonjeong sweats as he told him that Sayu didn't want a war. If they just let him go, what would Sayu do? Well, Sayu honestly replied that it will reduce some nuisance for him, and he will be grateful for that. Wonjeong thanked him for his generosity and let him go. 10 years, only with 10 years achievement. The idea of blocking the Heavenly Artillery General itself doesn't make any sense. Sayu didn't notice that it was already 10 years had passed since his master passed away. He moved in a hurry, but before leaving he walked towards one monk who had lost his right leg. He told him that if he wanted revenge, find him and he will face him then. Wonjeong calls him master and asks where will he go after he goes down the mountains. Sayu thought about it and his decisions are to go to the mainland to fulfill the last wishes of his master and friend. Wonjeong laughed and jokingly replied that the mainland is going to be noisy from now on. Sayu looked back and smiled. He bolted off, leaving the monks behind. Han Mu-Beak, the evil spirit, has a storm-like power whose aura used to overwhelm everyone. But they didn't feel any aura from the disciple. It means that he successfully reached the level where he knows how to hide his power, and maybe he has already surpassed his master. Perhaps he is the most accomplished heavenly artillery general ever. Hi everyone, thank you for watching the video. If you're wondering about if there's part 2, yes there is, and we'll upload it in the upcoming days. So don't forget to like and subscribe for more content like this. Also, leave a comment down below about your thoughts on this manhwa. Again, thank you for watching, see you next time.